Well, actually, so when I got into tech, I was actually in my 20s because
You were in
I've
your
been in my
20s.
I've been at Microsoft for 17 years, but I had
Oh,
did yeah, I started out like pretty much probably about 5 6 years out of college. I started, and I mean I can go over it, but pretty much what happened was I was actually just working as a receptionist. My dad had got me this job at this small 8A company.
okay.
I was just doing like secretarial kind of stuff, making business cards and stuff. And the IT guys that were running it, they were running a couple kind of like small companies, and they were brothers, man. So they would pop in, and I was like, man, these dudes always driving nice cars, they dress nice and everything. So I kind of took a gravitation to them, and then I was still gigging, so they had come out to my gigs to hear me. So we kind of built a little bit of a rapport, right? So
Right.
they would hit me up like, Elliot, hey, can you go back to the server and this is back with NT4. Can you go back and enable this user account? It got disabled, so it kind of started like that, right?
Wow.
And I kind of got a taste into that. So yeah, I mean, I can go through that, when we're talking through it.
Yeah.
But prior to that, man, my only technical before I went to school at ATI Career Institute was when I was in college. I was a music major. My wife actually had to show me how to even log into the computer.
Say what?
All
Wow.
Run it. I can't take no loss. I don't even know what it costs. I hit the ground, then it go off. Yeah, hit the ground, then it go off. Yeah, I can't take no loss. Yeah, I don't
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This is Them Tech Folks. I'm your host, Rico Randall. I'm sitting here with some of my co-hosts. I have Marco Randall,
Marco Randall, welcome back, guys.
and we have Reginald Davis. Today, we're going to be having a conversation with Mr. Elliott Fields, and we're going to be talking about his journey to tech and what some of these significant things mean that we've been discussing in the past, such as inclusivity, representation, maybe some imposter syndrome situations that a lot of us struggle with from time to time. But I won't belabor this, and we're gonna go ahead and introduce you to Mr. Elliott so he can give you guys his story. Elliott, how you doing?
doing good, my brother, doing good.
All right, man. So, like I say, we want to hear about your background, where you come from, how you got introduced to this tech thing, and some of your other ideas. So, start us off with where you came from and how you work your way up, and we'll jump in from time to time to kind of delve a little bit deeper on some of these concepts, if that makes
Cool,
sense.
cool. Yeah, man. Yeah. So let's get ready for the ride, man. So, I was actually born in Maryland, Cheverly, Maryland. Grew up down in Southern Maryland, down near Point Lookout. But Southern Maryland is kind of like I think folks may know that area a little bit better. Probably about an hour outside of the DC area, up kind of near Prince George's County as well. So I grew up down there, went to school, in high school and everything there. Went to Bowie State University as a music major. So, I played saxophone pretty detailed and stuff through high school. And I actually went to school and was a music major at Bowie State. So at Bowie State, got into like gigging and playing. My saxophone instructor was actually Gladys Knight's cousin, right? So he had this
Wow.
hookup. So I got to play with Aretha Franklin, the Temptations, the Dells.
You
I
played with the
played
Temptations and Rita?
Temptations, the Dells. Yeah.
Wow.
Now it was. I won't go too much into it, but there was multiple factions near the end of their career. They had broken into two separate groups, but I played with one of those groups.
That's
So
dope.
my sax instructor was in the musicians union, so he would always pull like the college students to go play, right? So that was kind of my journey out of school. I met my wife at school in band camp, right? Like American Pie. So we met in band camp and
Hold
everything.
on, hold on. Wait.
Was there a
Don't
flute
glaze over
involved?
that. Was
Yes,
it like
yes, she
American
actually
Pie?
played flute. She's a flute. She was a piccolo player, man.
My God.
Wow.
But I can't go too much on that because she'll kill me when I get
Yeah,
off of here, man. She'd be like,
don't
"Why
get
you?"
in trouble.
But I met her in band camp. We've been married for 25 years now. Been together for 30 years. You know what I mean? I got a 15-year-old son, so Bowie State is.
If it was anything like American Pie, of course you've been married for 25 years.
Of course.
Of course.
Why would you not?
Absolutely, man. So, I coming out of college, man, I gigged for like a couple years and stuff. Kind of another story. Me and my dad were a little bit estranged, growing up and stuff. He wasn't around. Luckily, before he passed, we kind of made amends and everything. But where this kind of ties in with the story is, he was like, well, son, I know you're gigging and stuff, but, you probably need to get some kind of a regular type job. You know what I mean? Like a 9 to 5. So, he was able to hook me up. It was a small, actually a black-owned 8A company called Armstrong Data Services. And, at that company, they were 8A and they were actually I think what you call like a parent 8A company. They'd bring in all these other kind of tutor these other 8A companies to come in. But anyway, I was there creating business cards, answering the phone, right? And it was these two brothers that had their own IT service. Brandon and James Bino. I'm sorry, Brandon, if you're listening. I can't remember your last name, but those two brothers were inspiration to me, man. Like I would see them come in. They always dress flashy, which is kind of ironic because I'm a t-shirt guy, but I thought it was pretty cool that they always came with the nice cars. They had all these Lexuses and stuff. And I was like, man, I got to get into IT. So, what would happen is because I was still gigging from time to time, they would come to my gigs. So I kind of built a little bit of a rapport with them. And, so they felt comfortable enough to call sometimes and say, Elliot, we can't come in because we got 2 or 3 other customers. Can you go back on the server and reset this user account? Can you go back and reboot this box? And I was like, you know what? This stuff's not really super hard, right? So, and that's one thing when you're doing the little, fix it stuff. So I had looked up, this company was out in Tyson's Corner in Virginia. And at the time, they had a school called ATI Career Institute. And I was telling Rico, basically, they did multiple things. It was a culinary school and an actual IT school, right? My wife actually started going there first. We're both music majors, but that kind of shows you. She ended up doing culinary for a bit after that, and I ended up stretching out doing the IT thing. But, went to school there, and the president of the company found out, like, hey, Elliot, I heard you were going to school for computers. And I said, well, yeah, I actually did enroll. I'm thinking like, well, you already have like James and Brandon here doing this. Man, when I tell you God is good, they had actually found a bigger contract. And they came to me probably a week later, no lie, man. And they was like, hey, Elliot, look, we're going to end up having to move on. So do you mind if we kind of show you some pointers on how to run the network, right? Now, this is a person that all I knew at the time was how to reset a user account. When I first started out doing this, they had NT4, they had Exchange 4.0, and they had a Novell 312 server, right? I had never worked with any of this stuff. So, I'm actually enrolled to get my enterprise management, network enterprise management degree at ATI. And I was actually still in my A+ class. They hadn't even taught me networking. And now all of a sudden, I'm the network administrator, the only network administrator at this small company, right? So yeah.
Hold on. Did they actually send you to like a course, or
No.
did they literally just give you some pointers?
I had enrolled just on my own, right? I was like, you know what? I like doing this stuff that they're sending me to do. Regardless if this company hires me to do that, I want to actually go to school for it. So I had enrolled about a week, 2 weeks before all this happened, just off of faith. Like, I'm going to do this regardless, right? I got the news with James and them after the fact. So then after all of this stuff goes down, now all of a sudden I'm like a week into A+, but now they've got me as the administrator for this whole network that I know nothing about. So what I did is, as I look at Reggie up there tripping, man. But basically what I did is, as I'd learned something in class, I'd try and apply it within the network, and go through and set stuff up. And eventually I ended up rebuilding the whole environment, which kind of got me into the whole lab thing, which to this day, I'm a lab rat. You know what I mean? Like, the difference now is I don't have to go and buy surplus boxes to build up stuff for a network and put it on like a folding table. I can actually do everything virtual when infrastructure is code.
Oh,
so yeah, man. Well, basically after, so I stayed at Armstrong Data Services. I think it was probably for about, so this is in 97, right? So I stayed there for a little bit. Kind of the great thing about that environment and the bad thing about that environment was I was the only administrator there, right? So the good part about it is I had to figure everything out on my own, right? And the disadvantage of back then, and so remember, this is back when they had Lycos, Excite, Yahoo, all of these were search engines, right? I don't know if y'all remember. You ever heard of what they call it, Gazoogle? So Snoop Dogg partnered with Google, and I think you can still look it up, right? Anything that you go in and type a search for, it actually gives it back to you in the form the way Snoop would say it, right?
What?
So you can type in like, how do I actually build a PC? It'd be like, first, you need to go and buy this Bazizzle. You know what I mean?
I am not surprised, man. Snoop is in every fucking thing,
yes, he
bro.
is, bro. Yes,
Snoop,
he is.
Bro, me and my wife play Call of Duty Mobile. Snoop got a character.
That's Snoop, man. That's
Why
Snoop.
wouldn't it?
Everything, man.
Why wouldn't it?
Snoop pop out. He always pop out like, what was that joint, that half-baked joint? And he just popped up from the steps. He was like, yo, what's going on, homie?
I love Snoop,
What's cracking like, man?
Yeah. Took a long ass
man.
hit too.
For sure, man. But so I started out at that company, but the bad thing was I didn't really have a benchmark to go off of, right? So, and for those folks that are out there and you're at a small company, sometimes you just have to have faith in yourself. But because I didn't actually work with other people, I didn't know how good or how bad I was, right? So for a long time, I was kind of worried about trying to find another place to go. And then I decided to just go to a job fair, right? I went to this, and out in Tyson's, they had these all over the place. And I got hired by the company at the time was called Wang. I don't know if y'all heard about that, right? Wang. So they used to make computers, Wang Computers, W-A-N-G, right? So I got hired by them through a company called Sykes, right? And so I came on, started doing when I first came on with them, by the time they got me to a customer site, it had then became what they call Jetronics. And then Jetronics Gov eventually became DigitalNet. Long story short, with that company, I contracted with them, did Exchange. So Exchange was my specialty. This is back when it was, I did Exchange 5.5, probably stayed around 5 until I got the 5.5 until I got the Microsoft, right? But I stayed there for probably about 2-3 years. I was the principal engineer for what they called the Consolidated Office Automated Resource Domain, which was basically a resource exchange hub for all the email for the United States Department of Justice. So all the mail from all of those U.S. attorney offices flowed through our data center, and I was the principal to go through and actually handle any and all exchange issues that arose from that.
Did you still have a question as to how good you were?
Well, not by that point, but I will say this. Even to this day, man, you always want to question yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because you always have to be hungry. IT's not a profession that you can stay in and just live off of what you did before, right? No one cares that you did whatever you did yesterday. It's all about what you're doing today, right? Mm-hmm. So because of that, that's the reason why I'm still up. Probably even later tonight, I'll be doing some more infrastructure as code stuff for, training, staying up on your certifications, making sure not that you're just paper certified, right? But making sure that you actually know what it is you're working with and keeping yourself where you can be gainfully employed. You know what I mean?
So I'm going to tell you guys something, and you guys, Mark and Rico, you guys can appreciate this. We go to lunch, we go to dinner. Elliot got his laptop. Got his laptop out, banging shit out.
Bruh, I don't never go nowhere without putting my laptop in my car.
And on top of that, I've got Azure on my phone. I can RDP via my VPN to all of my machines. But anyway, I don't want to get too far into that.
Man, you ever do that? No, you ever work from your phone?
Actually, I work from my Tesla. I can work from the Tesla now. I got the little browser in there. I can connect the Azure from the browser and remote into the machine.
Hey, as soon as he put it in his car,
keyboard to it and get to it.
As soon as he put it in his car, he showed everybody. He took pictures of it, showed everybody. Like, look, man, I got Azure in my car. Both of these guys got Teslas too.
Welcome to the thing. You got a model? Which model you got?
Model Y, the performance.
Oh, you got the Y?
Okay.
Yeah, I got the
Oh,
same one. I wish I would have got the X, man.
Yeah,
I wish I would have got the X.
I got the Y because I wanted to just buy it outright. I ain't want no payment. So
Right. I mean, it was
yeah,
only
but
like
the X is nice. I like them doors.
yeah, yeah. I got the S.
and it's a little bit bigger though.
I appreciate you being humble and not want to beat that, but I think that's important. It's important because a lot of people feel like you just get in and you're in. Like, no, you're constantly moving. You're constantly running. You're constantly. I hate the not the carrot thing, right? But it is right. You got to maintain relevance because
Stay
tech
on the
is always
grind.
changing, and if tech is always changing, you need to be always changing. You need to be always growing, right?
Facts.
So yeah, no days off. I mean, not no days off, but no days off. All right, go ahead, man.
And you still have, I mean, so that kind of goes on to a great area, right? So at Microsoft, we have this, well, and I won't say just Microsoft, they always talk about work-life balance, right?
Yep.
Any company that you go to, they will never create work-life balance for you. It is your responsibility to create work-life balance.
Yep.
What most companies mean by work-life balance is you make the decision of how much you want to actually do for home, but then that means that there's going to be something that doesn't get done at work. Same thing applies. There may be more that you're doing at work for a period, which means there's going to be less that's going to be done at home, right? But that's your decision to do, and you kind of trade off on that, right? I've been at Microsoft now for 17 years, right? I've had years where I have more family-centric stuff that I have to concentrate on for that year. So that year, I may not be hitting on as many cylinders as I was before. I still have to maintain a certain level, but I may not be going for like that super big bonus or, all of the accolades for that particular year, right? Because it's the long game, right? For me, that's the one thing that I love about Microsoft is because that's kind of your decision, right? If you're that person that wants that absolute, like you got to be all the way on the top this year, no one outshines you, chances are there's probably going to be some impact at home, right?
Right.
Not for everybody. There's some folks that are just gifted in that manner where they can actually super juggle both of those. But most folks, there's going to be a trade-off on some side, right? And that's the reality of it. So, that concept of work-life balance, while it does exist, is not the way that they preach it. You know what I mean? There's going to be times where you have a deliverable that you may have to go. It may be like a friend's kid's recital or something. I can't make it to that. I got to finish this for the next morning meeting. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. Have you been in like in your earlier parts of your career? Have you had people, maybe your wife, kind of like do almost like an intervention, like, look, you working too much, man. You gonna burn yourself out. Have you ever had those kind of conversations? Yeah.
Yeah. Even now, I mean, and my wife's good about it because she knows the problem with me, right? And this is my problem, right? Is that's actually my passion, though.
Hold on for a second. Sir, Reginald, Reggie, Big Reg, if you gonna type,
you typing loud.
You got them damn Twitter fingers, man.
Are you serious, dude? My keyboard is like so
every time, man.
My mic is up here. My keyboard's all the way down.
Can you go one session without having to pull up Pornhub?
But shots fired.
I wasn't gonna say nothing, but you got some glitter right here.
Oh,
you got
man.
Glitter.
Hey, man, my wife listens to this part.
We gonna edit it out, man. Don't worry.
You got that door closed.
Man, my
don't get edited out.
Y'all tripping, man.
Mute yourself, man. Mute yourself.
I have coworkers that might listen to this too, man. You tripping?
Yeah, one of them online right now, interviewing while you typing with them heavy ass fingers you got.
Dude, my keyboard is so far away from the mic. Like my mic's way up here in the keyboard. I'm surprised y'all can still hear it. It's crazy.
And that speaks for itself.
I can hear the letters that you were typing, man.
I know.
Y'all is so stupid.
Yeah. I can hear the words.
I hear the keys screaming. All right, go ahead. All right. That's enough. All right, get back.
Nah, I mean, all I was saying is, so what it is that for most folks, like their spouse would actually kind of pull them away from. My wife understands that it's my passion, right? So, a lot of times I may be working on something in the evening. It's work related, but it's more about me bettering myself, right? So, I'm big on not just doing the tech stuff that my customers need or what my current job requires me to do. I want to work on stuff on what I plan to do in the future, right? And that's kind of a good guidance for folks that are new in the field. You may be working the help desk, right? It doesn't mean when you go home, you completely just cut off your computer and you're like, look, all I do is answer calls during the day. If that's your mindset, that's all you're going to continue to do, right? So, when I was working, and you work in the government, there's times where we're always behind, right? So they're always going to be using an older OS. Back in the day, it was an older version of Exchange or SQL. I'd always have my home lab where I'd have the beta release, like release candidate 1. Like I wanted to be that guy that like could, and this is where I'm a geek when I go hang with my buddies. Like, hey man, I got that new version of Exchange I just installed. They were like, nah man, that's not out. I'm like, nah man, I found it. Got it installed, set up. I'm like, matter of fact, I just sent you an email from it right now. Go check the OWA interface out.
Bruh, that's what I'm talking about.
That's dope.
Yeah.
Bro.
I was just telling somebody about how I was geeking out when I was in Iraq, man. It was around the time they was coming out with they were still working on Windows 7 and they had the code name Longhorn.
Yup.
They had the aerial view and
Yes. Nah, I remember that, man. And the crazy thing is, in a lot of our code, when you talk about those code names, there's certain times where you'll click on something and it'll still have like Longhorn server, like in the code, So you'll still see some of those. Yeah.
Dang. That's crazy, man.
So one of the things that we like to touch on is representation, right? What does representation mean to you? Representation and diversity. Can you kind of?
It's more about different ideas that people bring. That's the importance that I see with diversity, right? Outside of color, outside of gender, because all of those matter, right? I know my walk, right? I know all of you guys walk. As a person of color, we know that walk, right? What I've experienced and I've always tried to champion is what women have to deal with in IT, right? Because it's not many. Think about the fact that it's not many of us that are of color, right? But then there's also even less women that are in the field, and then there's even less women of color, right? So because of that, I've had some different mentees and over the years and stuff, and I've actually had the opportunity to work in workplaces where you kind of see the nuanced bias, right? That happens, right? The fact that like, if I'm in IT and you're talking and I want to actually get my point across, I just overtalk you, right? I mean, not saying that that's what I do, but that's what a lot of folks do in IT, right? Yep. But there's this perception that sometimes when a woman does it, folks will leave out the room like, man, dude, she's bugging. I won't say the word that they say, you know what I mean? But that same energy is not the case. Like if it's a guy, it's just more like, well, he's just ambitious. You know what I mean? So that's something that I always bring up to folks. And I bring this up too. Like, I don't know, maybe you guys have this. I never have to go into work, right? And think of anything other than IT stuff, right? Imagine, and I will get into the nuances of when I first got in the field, things we have to think about. But I started to think, it was another coworker, and she was like, well, man, like this guy is always gawking at me. So she's got to figure out what she wears to work. If someone's checking her out, are they working with her because, it's just so many other factors that it kind of opened my eyes to, man, there's folks that have to go to work every day and deal with this. You know what I mean? When I go in, man, I put on whatever I can fit into for the day. And, as long, you know what I mean? And if I get there, it is what it is, right? I don't care if stuff matches or anything. I have zero care about anyone looking at me or trying to talk with me in that manner, right? And that's another thing too. And I talked with Rico about this earlier. I think what Microsoft found is that by bringing in all of these other demographics, you bring in a whole new level of creativity, right? And I mean, other professions have known that, right? Forever. And matter of fact, IT's known that forever. I was telling Rico back in the day, IBM used to actually bring in for the programmers, they bring musicians in, right? And they said it was because musicians use the different parts of their brain for improvisation, right? Specifically jazz musicians, right? Because when you're improvising, right, think about it, it's that same, I equate the improvising to troubleshooting, right? You have folks that are they're theoretical IT folks, right? So you've had that friend that knows like, oh, well, on this server, this is the max amount of memory that we can actually put for this particular operating system. So they can go through all of those specs, but it's like, okay, but the server's broke. What's wrong with it? That's when the improvisation comes in. And based on previous experiences, you're able to pull upon that. And that type of thinking is the same thing you do with music, right? If I go sit in with a band, I may know the song that they're playing, but I have no idea the way that they play it, the way they're going to have certain hits there. If the keyboard player is going to ride the chord changes a little bit different, that now completely changes what it is that I'm going to actually play, as the soloist. So it's that exact same thing when I'm troubleshooting. I look at it as though I'm the soloist, and then each person that's kind of handling their part, whether it's a bigger issue and it's the backup team or it's the AD team, each one of those folks are kind of taking their solo of improvising to figure out what the actual problem is.
That's a great analogy, man.
Yeah.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah, man.
I didn't want to overtalk, but did you go into that history of yourself yet, Elliot?
I did. I don't know. Was that pre-recording or was that on the recording?
I mean, it's on a recording, but
I think I went through it. Yeah.
It's your show, bro. You can do what you want to do. You want to go back into it? I mean, I hate to make you suffer and have to pay because Reggie was late. But if you want to do that, I'm not going to.
Okay.
I did touch on it. I don't think about it. I did touch on it because I talked about Aretha Franklin, the Temptations, the Dells, all that stuff. We went through that. We did cover it. Yeah,
it's cool. You know what? Guess what? I know the story already, so I don't need to rehear. I was doing it for y'all benefit.
But it's been like that for a long time where Reggie just gets what he wants.
Reggie right down the street. I can go out back and yell hooty hoo, and he could probably hear me, man.
You know what? You know what to make Reggie.
The cops gonna come now. The cops gonna come now.
Hey, you know what? That's Reggie a real one though, man. Reggie a real one. All you really gotta do is get Reggie to show up. Throw your hat now.
And you know what that hat throw was, right? Yeah, that hat throw was like, man, forget this job.
You know what? When you said that makes sense. It was like, forget this job. It's just me. Cause that look, man, it was on after that, bro. It was on after that.
For sure, man.
Mentorship. You hinted on mentorship. What's mentorship, like for you right now? Do you have a mentor? I know you are a mentor, but kind of talk about both of those.
Yeah. So, I mean, the great thing, and just to finish up with the diversity thing, I think I definitely do not want to leave this out. So Reggie was instrumental in actually establishing the chapter that we have for Blacks at Microsoft here in Tampa. Mm-hmm. I've actually been a part of Blacks at Microsoft ever since I came on, right? So back in the day, it was more like, a networking, we all kind of got together, went out to like happy hours and stuff, and just to meet folks. They actually used to have like events out in Redmond that we would, I'd fly out from DC to go to. Now the chapters, because back then it was one band, right? There wasn't like these different chapters that they have, like, there was the national chapter and that's it. But now they've grown so much that these different, metro areas now have that. And Reggie was instrumental in getting the one set up down here. But, it's super important not only for the networking, internal, but then also the outreach. There's different programs, like I know up in DC, there was a ton of programs where they do like, Digi Girls. So, young girls of color, they would actually bring in and have these coding days, like, the little Minecraft where you can go through and move the blocks. They'd have it for younger kids. They'd have like, different, high level women guest speakers and stuff that would come. But, Microsoft really does do its part. As I said, there's Blacks at Microsoft. We have a women at Microsoft. There's, a ton of different other, I think LATAM has like their own group.
Hola.
Reggie actually can touch a little bit more on that. He knows those.
I mean, it's just we call them. I think we talked about it before. We call it employee resource groups. I think you guys had a name for it where you work at, Rico, Mark.
Yeah. We well, we don't have. I don't know the name of the group, but like what they title the groups as. But like some of the groups that we have for us at least is like build. There's blacksmith. We got a few groups that I'm a part of.
Yeah, it's important that because I mean, not to land on Microsoft, but just about every ERG has a group. I mean, we even got they even got Africans at Microsoft, Ola, military at Microsoft. I mean, every
yes,
military at Microsoft.
I'm gonna hop into that too.
Yeah, every segment you can think of, they have. They even have mixed at Microsoft. It's a brand new one too.
Sound like you have like skinheads at Microsoft.
Wow.
They probably wouldn't,
Wow.
Somebody might have like a little group or something internal, but it's not anything that's like funded or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah. On the mentoring piece, so I that's been big to me, right? A lot of my mentoring. So when I first came on, it was informal, right? I looked at it like, when I came on, and I'll be perfectly honest, man, like when I came on, Microsoft was a different company, right? It wasn't that company where we had this mentality that we went through of heroes to mentees, right? And the logic behind that is rather than trying to be an actual hero and you being the only person that knows all of the information, you should share that with your coworkers to make them better, right? So hence the heroes to mentees. But when I first came on, that was not the MO, right? It was almost looked as though like when you came in, you were Microsoft. You were supposed to know your stuff. And like they'd have these aliases and folks would send questions out and they would just get torched. Like, how in the world do you not know this? Like, so because I saw that, I never sent out questions. I would stay up till 3, 4 a.m. in the morning to figure it out on my own doing labs. So because of that, I never wanted anyone else to go through that. So whenever I saw anyone that was like, hey, man, how do you do that? Reggie will tell you, man, if I got a listening ear, we could be at the bar when I used to drink. I'd be like, hey, man, pull your lab up, pull your laptop up. Let me walk you through how to build this Exchange lab right here. Or let me walk you how to do this. And, that transitioned into my GitHub repo that I have out there now. It's called Killer Home Lab. But basically what I do with that is I have all of these examples of infrastructure as code that folks can use for their lab environments. Because to me, mentoring is like key, man. Now we have formalized programs and stuff now. One of the ones that Reggie had kind of touched on a bit is the military program. It's called MSSA. And what that basically is folks that are just coming out the military, we basically do these cohorts where for like about almost a month, 2 months, every other week, we have a session. So they have an on-site training that they do. And there's like instructor led. They go through working with them, basic concepts on-prem, setting up a domain controller, Active Directory, how to join the domain. And then they transition with them into Azure and cloud stuff. And then we hop on every other week to kind of walk them through like, what problems are you having? If they have questions about the industry, well, how would I approach an interview? Or, if they ask me this, what do I say? Do I really need to know this? So, pretty much any questions they have is what we do in that.
So just to kind of get clarity, right, which is something that I never experienced before. So they have hard skills, and which is like the technical stuff, but I've never went through a soft skills course, and that was really eye opening to me because I actually think I'm pretty good at soft skills, which is something that a lot of people don't have, especially in IT, right? So to go through a soft skills course is one of those things. Your soft skills are the stuff that you do outside of providing those technical solutions. How you interact with the customer, how you interact with, if you're going out for a job, how do you interview, how do you present yourself? How do you, I guess, what's the word?
You're missing the big one though. You want to give it a shot, Elliot? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Well,
I give you
yeah,
one more
go,
shot, and then Elliot gonna
no,
fill it in.
You
yeah,
talking
go
about
ahead.
code switching?
Nah. But that's
I
a
was
good
gonna,
one though.
I
I
was
actually
gonna say
don't.
something about.
Personally, I actually don't subscribe to code switching.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody does. Everybody does, but
I don't
I
now.
hate doing it. I hate doing it. The thing that I was kind of wanting you to say, Reggie, the biggest part of soft skills, conflict resolution. Conflict
It's
resolution
facts.
is probably the most important soft skill you can learn.
Yeah, they they have a lot dedicated to that.
Yeah.
So, but getting back to Elliot, right? So, I used to say when I first came on to Microsoft, I used to say I don't know how Elliot has the time because you know what I found out. Every time somebody would be like, "Hey, man, I need this or that or the third," everybody would get sent to Elliot. Like, you need a mentor, you need somebody to help you. Yo, this dude Elliot. I'd be like, dude, you got like 17 like mentees. What's going on? You know what I'm
I
saying? So
had
like,
18 at one point.
yeah. So like,
Wow.
that's what I'm saying because everybody be like, yo, you need to go talk to Elliot. If you want to know about
Yeah.
this, you need to go talk to Elliot. It was crazy. And I mean, luckily we hit it off as friends and mentor mentee because he mentored me when I first came into the company. But yeah, dude, it was crazy. Like everybody would be like, man, a couple people that that work with Microsoft, it's like, oh yeah, man, I was on a call with him. Like everybody wants like, yo, go talk to Elliot, go talk to Elliot. So that's tough. I used to be like, I don't know how you manage all that shit to still get your work done because you
Yeah.
spend a lot of time mentoring people. How do you actually do your work, right? So, but anyway,
Yeah. I mean, mentorship's cool. It's huge, man. It's huge.
I
Like,
love it.
I
I
told y'all
love it.
about when I found my mentor. I thought I was gonna get fired, bro. Like I was going off, because it was a lot going on, man. I recently found out, my dad had cancer and stuff, and I literally got rolled off of back to back projects, and it was fucked up because they knew what I was going through, right? And they still, nobody really reached out to see what was the underlying, situation for my, behavior. And it wasn't like, just me going off for going off, say I was disrespected, and it was just, I don't know. It's your night, bro. I ain't gonna pull it away.
Hey man, no. You touched on something that's valid, man, and I tell this to the MSSA. Like when they're like, "Hey, well, in the field, do you get with a company and you stay with that company for a long time? If the company's treating you right, right? But always realize that with a company, companies are about profit, right? So while your manager may have empathy for what you're doing, that person that's 4 or 5 levels up has no idea what's going on. You know what I mean? So all they're looking at is on paper, right? And what happens is if you don't have a person that's directly tied with you that's strong enough to articulate that far enough up the chain where it makes an impact, and what I say with that is you are supposed to be as loyal to that company because it's a transaction. You know what I mean? Like companies now, if they can find someone that does exactly what you do just as well as you do it for cheaper, they're going to. So as a person that invests in yourself, you have to make sure that you're always evaluating what is going to be the best situation for you as well, right? So, I tell all folks, and I love being at Microsoft. I've been at, like I said, been at Microsoft now for 17 years. I've loved every minute of it. With any company, there's going to be some stuff that you don't like, right? One of the things that makes companies great is change. The running joke at Microsoft is whatever it is that you don't like, wait long enough because it'll change back to what you did like, right?
Yeah.
And that does happen, it's one of those things where if you're in it for the long haul, you ride with that company as long as you can ride with them. If it gets to the point that you're seeing a different trajectory for something different, then you keep your skills tight and you have to hop off onto something else.
How do you go about since you are most of the time the mentor, right? And from that perspective, you had so many mentees. How do you choose a mentee, and how do you be like, you know what, this dude ain't gonna be about nothing, versus like, you know what, I really think this guy has potential. He could be somebody. I mean, you ain't gotta phrase it like that, but you can tell like when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, could you mentor me, please?" And then they're like, "Oh yeah, sure," and then they're not. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
Rico's laughing. Did I say it wrong? Did
He
I
probably
no,
be
it
like,
sound bad the way I said it?
nah, I only
I
mentor
thought you-
winners. Get out of here.
That's what I was like, nah, don't get out of here. You ain't about that life.
About that
I
life.
don't really think you about that Microsoft life. Get out of here.
You don't look like Elliott Fields, bro.
man. Well, I will say this, man. I mean, there are definitely varying levels of folks. But once again, man, I mean, it's about having grace, right? When you're mentoring somebody, I take all comers, right? I mean, Reggie knows a couple of the folks that I had. You know, I mean, and sometimes I look at it like the same way that you were saying, Rico, like you had something that was going on in your life, right? So I always take it as when somebody comes, they may not be as willing to dedicate themselves to certain, you know, ideas that I've given them, but maybe it's that they got something going on in their life, right? So I try and make sure that that door is always open, right? And Reggie will tell you, like, I'll be like, look, man, when you get the free time, I'm here, right? So generally, as I said, a large amount of what I do is surrounded by lab work, right? So generally, if I get someone, it's like, all right, well, what is it that you're trying to do? Do you want to still stay technical, right? That's another area we can touch. Microsoft is great in. You may have based on. I have friends that have worked at Microsoft for the same amount of time I have, and they've went through different roles, right? And they've actually chosen those roles based on the amount of time they have to spend in those roles as far as work-life balance, right? Or budgetary, right? You may be in a country like, hey, you know what? I need to get into a role where these bonuses are like legit. You know what I mean? So let me, you know, in Microsoft, I know this sounds funny, but you could literally look at a training track, get paired up, and you don't have to be just mentored by another tech person, right? Say if I wanted to get in sales, I could find we have a site that you can go on. It's great if you find someone you know, but they'll pair you up with like a sales rep. And you could literally say, hey, look, this is what I want to do. What is the training path that I need to go through? And for the most part, they've got internal resources that would get you trained up. So it may not be like a, hey, I'm going to switch and do this in a month, but it could be like a 1-2 year plan where I know folks that were technical, switched up to becoming account managers, transitioned into sales, transitioned into like director positions, you know. And then I have another buddy that came in as a CSAM and transitioned to technical. So he took 2 or 3 years and got ramped to be a technical resource because he didn't want to do the managerial stuff. So, you know, that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of flexibility in Microsoft.
Absolutely. Absolutely,
can you
man.
see yourself no longer being at Microsoft? I mean, what are your future trajectories looking like?
I would not like that to be the case, but you know, I love technology. You know what I mean? So wherever it is in this hypothetical world where that would happen, you know, I just want to be someplace where I'm able to actually continue to do tech stuff. You know, in the weeds. I'm not a, you know, I did a couple. I've been through a couple roles since I've been on at Microsoft, right? Really, it's 2 base roles, but they've changed the name of one of them a couple times. So we have you guys may have known back in the day like PFEs, right? So Premier Field Engineers. You know, now we went through a transition of we were called CSAEs, and then we're coupled back into CSA, you know, CSAs. But we also have another faction called MCS, so Microsoft Consulting Services. So those were back in the day when I came on the main 2 dividing kind of roles, and you know, PFEs were more specialized and in the weeds, like 400 level or deeper, right? So if you needed a SQL guy, you'd get a SQL PFE to help you fix your problems, right? If you needed someone that was more architecture or high level, they needed to come out and actually do like a design. Generally, the MCS folks were not quite as deep in one particular area, but they were more broad, right? And they could come in and give you a full solution of, they may be familiar with Active Directory a little bit, Exchange a little bit, where they could literally come up with this holistic program. And the way the ecosystem's supposed to work is MCS is supposed to leverage those PFEs that specialize in these areas to help them develop an architecture, right? Once they finish the architecture, now the PFEs stay behind with the customer to actually care and feed the system itself. That cycle has changed a bit now, and they came up with what I call like a hybrid role between those two, which was the CSA. So the CSA had that architectural knowledge, but they still had that ability to, hey, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and go in here and work in this lab with you as well. So I've been through all three of those different positions, and they all have their pros and cons. I'm a person that wants to be, I'm not big on documentation. And fortunately, with infrastructure as code, you don't really need it these days because the code is the documentation.
I was about to say, bro, you
yeah.
just like you've been hammering about this GitHub, repo that you got. It's like self-documented.
The best way I can summarize this, right? Because I could have a whole 4 or 5 sessions on infrastructure as code. But imagine when you're building out a lab. So I don't know how much you guys have delved into building out domain controllers or Exchange servers or SQL servers. Think about the amount of time if you wanted all of that stuff in your lab and you wanted it built at enterprise level, right? The detail, like you didn't want to just install it, right? So for the DC, you want to make sure you're following all the recommendations. You've got split spindle sets. You've got your NTDS DIT for the directory is off on a separate set of disks. Infrastructure as code. So that would generally take me, if I was building it out manual, a couple days to go through, right? Once I've taken the time to build out infrastructure as code, Reggie will tell you, I've got environments or code that you can hit a button on and go get some coffee. And in 30 minutes, you come back, you've got a domain controller in 2 separate sites, a PKI environment, an Exchange server, SQL always on cluster. I mean, the level of detail that you can go into when infrastructure as code is endless. So
are you writing this stuff in is it mostly like PowerShell? I know you guys have PowerShell DSC.
It's ARM. So ARM.
It's
so
ARM?
yeah,
Is
so
it
ARM.
rebranded?
Yeah, well, no. So remember, and I can go as deep into it as we want to. You guys can pull me back. So basically, when you're doing infrastructure as code, there's different flavors, right? If you're talking just strictly Microsoft, then when you go into Azure, the portal that you look at now is actually called ARM. It's Azure Resource Manager, right? So everything that you do in the portal, underneath the scenes, when you get to the end and you get ready to click that deploy, it'll say download deployment. That format that you see is JSON, right? That JSON format is what we also call an ARM template, right? Yeah. So for instance, we could go as small as just an actual NIC card, right? In Azure. Because if I'm building a virtual machine in Azure, I've got a NIC, I have a disk, and then I got a VM object. That's the most basic, objects that I need to build out a machine. They're individual objects. Each one of those, I could have an ARM template that deploys that. So say, for instance, now I'm not just deploying one machine. I want to deploy 500 machines, but I want all of them to have this same configuration. I can use an ARM template, put a loop in it, and have it build that same machine with the same specs all at the same time. So literally, it would spawn all these separate sessions in, probably not 500 all at once, but it would do like maybe 20, 30, at a time in chunks and stuff. But now when you're talking about the DSC, that's what happens inside of the VM, right? So all the ARM template is going to do is build you out a machine. It's just the OS, it's built out with whatever OS you choose. What you mentioned, DSC, which is desired state configuration, was pulled from System Center, right? So back in the day, DSC was used to kind of keep a machine from what we call strain. So I don't want anyone changing the DNS server setting. If they do, DSC is going to change it back, right? So what I've done with a lot of my deployments is I've coupled the ARM template. So I'm deploying a machine. Now I've actually coupled what you were talking about. Inside of these DSC scripts, there's modules, but there's sometimes those modules don't do what you want. So you put PowerShell scripts inside of it, custom, right? So in this scenario, I've used that combination of the DSC along with the PowerShell script to actually make a box of domain controller, install SQL on it, configure the SQL databases, install Exchange, right? Install certain roles, download software and install it, right? And if you hop outside of Azure itself, then we have other products like Terraform, right? So Terraform is cloud agnostic. That's also a part of infrastructure as code, right? So if I'm using Terraform, I can use Terraform code to deploy not only in Azure, but also in AWS. And I believe they even have some instances you can use from like a physical machines, virtual, of course.
Do bare metal on vSphere. Yep.
So, so with that, and there's different gambits, right? I mean, I could talk as simple as I just have an ARM template where I want to just deploy like, just one deployment. I can run that from PowerShell, or I can have an enterprise approach where I'm collaborating with a team using DevOps or like GitHub server, right? So with that, I have the capability to load like an IDE, like VS Code, and I could literally have the code on my desktop, and I can do what we call continuous integration, continuous development. I could have that code, and somebody come to me and say, "Hey, Elliot, I need to actually change the IP on server 12." I can go into code, change it for the NIC that's represented in the ARM template, hit apply, push it, and it makes that change on the machine for me. So that's true infrastructure as code. Rolling the stuff out is great, but then there, I've worked with a few customers that have a concept where there's no one that's allowed to log onto the box. All changes have to happen using code. And the advantage with that is if I gave every one of you guys a detailed piece of documentation to do an install, I guarantee you those server builds would be different for each one in some way, right? With infrastructure as code, that's across the board. If I have you run that code, you can't change anything. You have to run the code the way it is, right? So some folks don't understand that concept of a Git repo, right? That repo you can break off into branches, right? So I could have like a developmental branch, I could have a main branch, and the same thing applies. Like if we were a team, say we were a team of 4, right? I may actually have branches that aren't necessarily specific for like development versus production. I may have a branch that like you're handling AD. Marco may actually be handling SQL, right? So what I could do is I could have that code merged back together, and then someone else like our manager would end up being like the approver. That's for the master piece of code. So you may be working on certain modules. We can couple that back together, and then we have a combined, and this gets really detailed, where we have releases, right? So within those repos, you build your part out and it may deploy like the AD piece. Well, then once that's complete and it's approved by management, we then get an approver, and then now it's moved on to the next team and they can deploy their part. So that's a full enterprise that's actually using infrastructure as code.
I appreciate the explanation, man. And if anybody's stumbling over the acronyms, DSC, Desire State Configuration, NIC card is a network interface card.
Yeah.
You did that, man. You did that. What do you guys I ain't gonna talk any like product specific questions. We'll take that offline.
I'm sorry, man. I was busy pointing this out to Reggie. My bad. What'd you say?
Marcus,
Reggie, you gonna let that ride?
Hey man, it's okay. Every clock's right twice a day.
I mean, I'm just saying he like all out. Yeah, he got.
Don't have me.
And everything.
Hey, Elliot, don't have me going. Don't have me go upstairs.
You see this degree right here?
Elliot, don't have me go upstairs.
I'm just saying, do you see this degree? This degree to here, you realize that's not an IT degree. My wife got that from my birthday. It's a 49er degree. It says I have a doctorate in being a 49er fan.
What?
It's a legit doctorate. Wow. It's signed by Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch.
Wow.
Yeah,
you definitely got a good one, man. I should have went to band camp.
Hey, yeah, there you go.
Nah, you chill, man. My wife is great.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you.
How'd you end up going from Exchange to Azure?
Oh, lab, right? So I'm gonna tell you how that ended up happening. So, I was doing Exchange, but remember, for almost all of this stuff, back in the day, I was doing physical labs, right? And it kind of correlated with Microsoft and what they gave us, right? So back in the day, they'd always give us these super like powerful boxes. And I'd always do back in the day, either Hyper-V or, man, I've went through all of them. I've used Oracle VirtualBox. I've used Hyper-V. I was working with VMware back when they had a Windows version called GSX. So they had the GSX server and they had the ESX server. When I was, and I didn't even go into that, but I was working at the Department of Justice, actually as a government employee at that point. And when I was working there, I was evaluating those too, right? But anyway, like I said, always been into like the lab stuff. So with Exchange, what I would do is I'd always build out these lab environments. When Azure came out, and this is back when it wasn't even ARM, it was actually called ASM, so Azure Service Manager. This was the old portal. I don't know how much you mess with it, but our portal has changed now. And I would basically build out these Exchange environments in Azure, right, to mimic what was going on. Well, when you start building all of that stuff out, you have to learn about, well, how am I going to network this? How am I going to actually make it so it has a public presence, right? So I could build out a public DNS zone in Azure. Well, how's it going to be reached? Well, I have to add a public IP address on it. How am I actually going to secure it? Well, I could set up an Azure firewall, right? So all of these things kind of correlate. And that's the thing that folks don't get is they get worried about Azure. They're like, well, I'm a SQL person. And now folks are going to Azure. Well, that's fine. And what you need to do is learn SQL paths, right? If you're doing, System Center and you're deploying packages on-prem, learn Intune. If you're doing Exchange on-prem, learn Exchange Online. If you're doing SharePoint Online, so all of these products have a cloud counterpart, right? It's just a different method that you're doing. So for me, I made that transition because initially I just wanted to build these super awesome, as close to production lab environments as I could. And Azure afforded that to me, right? I was used to, when I first got into this, the way I built the lab, and I didn't have a bunch of money, they used to have this computer surplus place where it was old government computers. You could go buy them for like $99. But every computer was different. Like one may have been like a Micro Millennia. The other one may have been like a Xeos Pantera, completely different NICs. So before I could even get to doing my lab, I got to find the drivers. So this is for old school folks, driversguide.net. I used to have to go and download the drivers for the NIC cards, for all that stuff. I had an old Bay Network switch that I would hook up. So I once I got enough machines and I bought enough machines, then I could build a lab. But every time you built that lab, it was manual, right? There was no, they had Ghost and imaging and stuff, but you can't do that with certain server products, right? So me getting into Azure was actually a progression of me always labbing stuff and Azure just being the ultimate place. Or not even just Azure. Cloud period is a great thing for lab stuff. I even tell folks, AWS is great. Like if you got like some small like VMs you want to do for free, they give you, I think it's 30 hours per month that you can actually set up a free AWS console. Cause I do stuff in AWS as well. I had this was actually a private one though. And Reggie will tell you this. I had a Killer Home Lab SharePoint site. And that one basically manually walked you through to how to set up all of this stuff. So how to set up, a DC in Azure, how to connect it with your on-prem via VPN, all that stuff. So I do the same thing for the AWS side as well, right? So walking you through how to build out a VPC, a local network, a network gateway to connect it from on-prem, from your Windows router and stuff. But everything that I do centers around lab. And the reason why it all ties back to my music, right? So back in the day with music, you had to practice, right? They call it woodshed, right? So you practice slow to play fast. Same exact thing and concept that I use in IT. I want to practice, right? Because by the time, like there's times, man, like I'm out. The reason Reggie will tell you, like I'm out, I want to be so confident that like somebody could be fighting at a bar and I'm literally like deploying something or writing code. So when I get in the meeting, what am I worried about them asking me something about? You know what I mean? Like if you're used to kind of operating under that type of, it's just second nature going through this stuff, it's going to make it easier when the customer's in front of you if you challenge yourself harder than what they can challenge you. So that's my concept with it.
Exactly.
Hey, you got
you're not under pressure because you're trying to figure out how to deploy this thing. If you're under pressure, it's something new. You're gonna have to, like you were saying in your other analogy, you gotta what'd you say? You gotta go off script. improvisation.
Yeah, improvisation. Yep.
You got to go into
Yep.
some improvisation when they give you some wrench that's like wait out of nowhere that you got to account
Yup.
for now.
Yeah,
And
that goes into Elliott's bravado of I just wear what I want, I walk in how I want because ain't nobody gonna be smarter than me in the room. So I don't really give a fuck. I'm telling you.
I don't feel that way. There's a lot of people
But
smarter
he's
than me.
like,
A whole lot of people
he be
smarter
like,
than me.
he be like, man, I know my shit, so y'all can now hit him with that
when
hit
he
him with
said a
that
lot of
CT
people
Fletcher
funny,
mentality. He's like, second and third,
That's my
second
dude.
and third.
That's my
This top
dude.
spot belongs to
So
me.
so I'm gonna tell you the reason why my wife is even better than what I was talking about. So when one of my birthdays, you know how they got the cameo joint? She got a cameo of CT Fletcher, right? So CT Fletcher is like Elliott motherfucking Fields.
wow.
What's going like? I have to share the video with y'all, dude. I was so that was one of the
Wow.
best birthday gifts I've ever gotten, man. He went through. He's like, so I hear you old punk ass 49er fan, right? Right. So he goes through all of this stuff. He said, "Oh, hardworking motherfucker, staying up all night, can't sleep." You know, if you ever listen to CT, you know how he gets into with the training. So he's equating all of this to like my work ethic with IT, man. Dude, I listen to that joint, and that sometimes I still keep the video. That joint gets me inspired, man.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, I know you do the tech. You take your computer everywhere, and you geeking out in your Tesla. But when you're not doing tech, like, what are you doing for relaxation and that kind of
Family,
family?
man. So my son, man, he's 15 and about 6'2", 6'3", right? So he's really big into basketball, right? So AAU stuff. Shout out to my boy Elliott Fields. That's my heart, man. But he plays on Newsom, so he's on Newsom's high school team. He's been in a couple different AAUs. So man, Reggie will tell you, man, like I love to roll out to go hang and have dinner with him and Fari and Nazar, but man, half the weekends we either in Atlanta or Orlando, for different AAU tournaments and stuff. So, combination of that, us just going good places to go eat, hanging out with the family. We still learn in Florida because I've only been down here in Florida for 2 years, right? So I'm still figuring out. Like we just did a little rendezvous. I call it a mini vacation down to Marco Island and stuff. So we're still figuring out some nice little beaches and stuff to hit. We hit Naples for a little bit. So yeah, outside of tech, man, for me, it's just hanging with family. I get a little bit of working out in for an old man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Pick a couple things up, put them down. That's about it, man. I'm simple.
Ain't no market at the island, man. Here you cross the airport. Is it kind of affordable? Can you get over there?
Actually, man, there's not many of us there, but I'm just saying. So, after he created it, he must have left, man.
The best I can do is Puerto Rico.
No chairs.
It's dope down there, man. It's pretty dope, man. It's a real chill little spot, and everyone was nice. You know what I mean? Like, it was a real chill vibe. We stayed at it's like a Hilton they got down there. It's got like a little open beach, not too crowded. I guess it was the right type of time of season that we went. And it's like a beach town, man.